everybody. It's time for another edition of Ask Mike. Courtney Mims alongside Mike Irwin here. And Mike, I do have to start Ask Mike with, please make sure if you are watching us on YouTube, please like and subscribe to us. If you're not subscribed to Pig Trail Nation, I don't know what you're doing, okay? We have great content. We don't just have Ask Mike. We have plenty of other shows. The Rubber Match with Evan Kamiko. We have Full Court Press with me during basketball season. Good stuff, Mike. So if you're not subscribed, are you really a fan? Okay, well, let's get into this week's questions because we have a lot. Baseball, softball, basketball even. We got more on those. For the second week in a row, though, is our first question is going to be about baseball. Hill Country Razorback is going to ask us, which was the bigger problem at LSU? Pitching or hitting? Both were disappointing, but I think hitting was a problem in all three games where pitching was really only bad in game 2.
Yeah, there were problems with all, but I wouldn't disagree with that statement. It's the 28 runners left on base because as the game announcers kept saying over and over again, Arkansas, if you go into the analytics, their ability to drive in runs in critical situations is why they are where they are. But what they didn't say was, yeah, but in certain situations, like during these when they've lost some of these games, you know, that they've lost what now, 4 of the last 5 series, something like that. Yeah. Driving runners in critical situations is not what they've done well. And again, when you leave 28 base runners, you've got a problem. The pitching really only boiled down to 2 things. Gage Wood, that was a real shocker because they're really counting on him. And he's got to bounce back this week or they've got some issues. Yeah. He looked more like, to me, he looked last year and 2 years ago. Gage Wood, from the moment that he's gotten here, he's been much more comfortable at home. He's more affected by being on the road. And I thought maybe he was past that, but that's what I saw. From the very first guy he pitched to, you know, on that Saturday game, I just felt like he didn't look like he'd done the previous 2 outings after he'd come back. He was missing his spots.
How much do you think of that is injury, though, and coming back from injury? Because Dave kind of said that during the broadcast when they interviewed him.
Why didn't it affect him in the first 2 games?
That's my question, too.
So hopefully it's not some sort of an issue there. But anyway, that was the one problem. The other was Aiden Jimenez, and that came out of nowhere. I mean, his strength has been he doesn't walk people. And that turned out to be in both appearances. He walked people, cost him 1 game, ended up costing him a game 2.
Yeah, Dave had some words about that, too.
He was mad when he relieved him. And then in game 3, it could have cost him. It didn't because they finally got some offense there in the top of the 9th. So, and then they got a great effort by Parker Coyle. But, yeah, I think the pitching was a little better. The thing is, if Arkansas is going to do what they need to do, all 3 of those areas, and they had some non-focus, what in the world's going on with the errors, like Helfrich, even though he wasn't charged with an error because of LSU's wacky scorekeeper. I guess he wanted that to be a base hit, but when you throw the ball down to third base and the third baseman has to lean over with the guy on third and basically go almost face forward on the ground and then turn around and try to throw the guy out at home. I mean, there's no way that didn't cause the run to score. So why you blame that on pitching, I don't know.
But scorekeeping is very subjective. We've talked about that on the show.
So yeah, I would say if you look at that whole series, the pitching was probably a little bit better than the hitting. The one thing that I will say is they weren't piling on runs, and especially I think it was the 8th inning when they had the bases loaded and you want to really score some runs and they only got 2 runs out of that with nobody out. A critical base hit could have gotten them 4 or 5 runs and made that pad a lot easier in the bottom of the 9th. I think that was in the top of the 9th, as a matter of fact. So, you know, it's still some problems both ways, but more hitting in this one than pitching.
Well, I think we have some more questions about that because we're going to dive into what exactly happened this past weekend in that series against LSU because Razor Alex 88 says, and you know, he's pretty up and down every week. I feel like we have a high week from Razor Alex 88, then we have a low week. Well, this might be one of the lows. Good, bad, ugly kind of series. Bad, losing in extra innings on Friday night. Ugly, getting hammered Saturday. But the good, holding them off in the ninth to win the series finale. Lost the series, but didn't get swept. Okay, he's kind of optimistic this
Well,
week.
and that's the huge part. And I'm still not sure that at least most fans do, but some may not understand how important it was to win that third game. Because if you lose that third game, LSU moves up into second place with you. Then there's all kinds of pressure there going into this series with Tennessee. And then it's just the mental aspect of, yeah, you swept, but then you got swept. So you had to do something positive in that game. Now they're all alone in second place. If they take care of business against Tennessee, they'll stay that way. Now, the big question that has to be asked is the D1 baseball poll, and I haven't looked to see if this all Monday when we do these things, it's when the polls are coming out.
Yeah, they come out, and then you're like, whoa, wait a second.
So D1 baseball has dropped them another spot from 7th to 8th. But I don't think the selection committee is going to do what D1 baseball. They're going to take other things into consideration.
RPI. I've
RPI
talked about
and
it on
all
the
that
show.
stuff.
Aren't they 5 in RPI? I think
Maybe even
fifth?
higher than that.
They might be.
So I think they're probably more a national 4 or 5 seed than a 7 or 8 seed. But the point is, if they had lost that game and then you're in a funk and you come back home and lose the series to Tennessee, then you're not a top 8 national seed. Then you're going to somebody else's regional if you win yours. And your own regional supposedly becomes tougher, although we'll talk about that later. It's not always the case. But I think winning that series and what they did on Sunday and the way they kind of gut checked and they both helped. You got scoring when you needed it, and then when LSU would get closer, then they would get more runs, and then they got good pitching. They pitched 6 guys in that game, and here's the ones that didn't. 2 of them gave up runs. Beidelshees and Jimenez gave up runs, but Dylan Carter, Christian Fouch, Cole Gibbler, and Parker Coyle all combined to go almost 6 innings and give up no runs. That's what you had to have. That's your Sunday pitching. And if you had asked me before that game, can Arkansas avoid a sweep, I would look at the Sunday pitching and say, are you kidding me? When you look at what LSU's done to them at the plate, and how many times did LSU come to the plate and just lay an egg? And the pitching was good. They weren't throwing a ball over the plate. They weren't serving up home run balls, and except for the first, except for Beidelshees. He gave up his typical 2 back-to-back home runs. But even that, what didn't happen there? He didn't walk anybody. There wasn't anybody on base, so it's 2 solo home runs. And that, we've always talked about, there's a big difference in giving up a solo home run and a 3-run home run.
There's a huge difference.
That's what they did in game 1.
Yeah.
It was all those home runs with people on base.
Absolutely. We're going to move on, though, because we want to make sure we're on time in the show today. Hog Redneck asks, is this wrong? Arkansas did in Baton Rouge what Texas did in Fayetteville. They walked in unprepared for what they were about to face, and they got embarrassed.
If the sweep, but the difference is they didn't get swept, so it's not like Texas. Now, you would have to be inside that team. I would have to be with Texas as they came in here and be around the players and be around the coaches. You'd have to do the same thing with Arkansas to know that's what happened, that they were overconfident, didn't pay enough attention. I don't know that. We've talked about that before. Fans watch something and they think they know the reason for something based on what you see in a game. And you don't always see that. Might be right, but it might be something totally different. So I can't say that for sure. But what I do know is, again, the difference between those 2 situations is Texas got swept.
Yeah.
And Arkansas didn't.
Well, that's a big reason because of all the things you just talked about, where the announcers were saying, and I believe some writers as well, like Andrew Hutchinson, were talking about if they got swept, that would mean that they were in danger of losing a top 8 national seed.
Yes.
I think they would have lost it. I really don't know if it would have. Maybe if you swept Tennessee,
it would put a lot of pressure on them.
It would have put a lot of pressure on them. Exactly. So this was huge that they were able to not get
So
swept.
no, it's not exactly the same.
Exactly. And I hope I pronounced this name right. Chalday44 wants to know. I hope I got that right. If I
He's
didn't,
kind of
let
a
me
new person.
A new
putting it.
question asker. We always love new question askers.
Right.
So we're going to go to his question right now. Why is Van Horn not correcting the following? Vaquiva is not swinging at first pitch strikes and is getting behind in the counts early. Cujillo needs to go down swinging, more often, not watching third strikes.
Yeah. And I would probably put Iredale in that group too. All three of them have an issue, and it's really interesting to watch how teams are starting to pitch them because you see a pattern. I have to believe that Nate Thompson has to be getting these guys after games and going back and saying, let's look at the video, let's look at how they're pitching you, because that's what they're doing with the Aloy brothers and Iredale. What they're doing is they're either throwing about that far outside the outside corner and they're swinging at it, or it's dropping down around to the ankles over the plate in either an off-speed or a curveball, and they're swinging ahead of the ball and above it, and instead of holding up. And you can watch some of Arkansas's other batters, Ryder Helfrich, for instance, very disciplined at the plate. He does not swing at bad pitches. To me, you get him in there and have him explain to those guys, because what's happening here, especially the Aloy brothers, they are so aggressive. And I don't think they're always trying to hit home runs, but I do think they're trying to tattoo the ball, and they're really going after it.
They're trying to hit it hard, yeah.
And other pitchers take advantage of that by throwing pitches that take advantage of how aggressive you are. If you're a little more, if you sit back and you're looking a little better and you're not just, I got to get this, then maybe and I see them hold off on some of these pitches. They do. But you ask yourself, why did you not fall for that pitch? Why did you fall for the one that struck you out? It's the same pitch. Why did that happen? You'd have to be in their heads to know that.
Sometimes it's a mind game.
Look, I will say this. Arkansas still the best hitting team in the SEC by a big margin. LSU's number 2, and I think there's 10 percentage points difference. And Arkansas, even though their ERA dropped, I think they dropped all the way down to 5th. At one time they were 3rd, but that's because of that run rule game. And we know what happened. Once Arkansas got down big early, Dave Van Horn was putting any pitcher out there that he didn't want to use on Sunday. Yeah. That he did want to use. He was saving his better pitchers, what he had left for Sunday, and that strategy paid off, but it did raise the ERA. And here's the thing, yes, they had some errors again.
But they're still really...
They're not tied now for number 1 in the nation in defense.
Oh, my gosh.
So when you look at this, and they're pitching, hitting, and defense, and combine them, it's the game announcers and either ESPN people, they kept saying over and over again, Arkansas has the best combination of those 3 of any team in college baseball.
Yeah, they said, I've heard many a times, even last weekend, even with losing the series to LSU, still announcers, still people who watch a whole lot of baseball saying Arkansas is the most complete team we've watched this year.
But they've got to stop having these games where they go in the other direction. Yeah. If you're that complete, why are you leaving 28 runners on base?
Exactly.
You got to stop doing that.
Exactly. And it's going to come back to bite you in the butt in what? A regional or a super regional, or even the College World Series if you can make it that far.
And what's going on with Aiden Eman is that twice, if he did it once, I'd say okay. Yeah. But he got out there twice and started throwing balls, and he doesn't do that.
I'll be honest with you. I had the same words as Dave Van Horn just a little bit earlier than when Dave was caught on camera saying them. So yeah. I understand the frustration there. Okay. We're going to talk about Van Horn, but coming up right after the break, we're going to let you know how people feel about him after that LSU series loss. That's coming up right after this. Welcome back to this week's edition of Ask Mike. Courtney Mims alongside Mike Irwin here. Mike, we were just talking about baseball. We're talking about, some people overreacting. When things happen and when this team loses. Well, we got some overreactions this week. Mousetown says, last week you predicted that it wouldn't be long until the Van Horn haters came after him again. Wow, it didn't take long.
Well, yeah, the question was, that was in regard, or my answer was in regard to a question where the guy had said, you know, okay, now they've swept Texas. What do you say now about Van Horn? And what I said was, you won't hear anything from the people that have been mad at him until they have a bad series, and then they'll be back. And he took one. But I do want to point out that it's not all negative. And this is one of the problems. I have a couple of problems with people on the internet when they kind of gang together. Have you noticed that?
Yeah.
I'm mad at Sam Pittman, or I'm mad at Dave Van Horn, I'm mad at somebody. So they kind of all coalesce together, and they're kind of feeding off of each other.
Yeah.
And when you're in that kind of an echo chamber, you can start thinking that everybody thinks that way.
You can, yeah.
There was a discussion on there that I was following, and I think it had to do with Pittman, but I'm not sure. But somebody said, he said, he posted, Sam Pittman, most fans gave up on Pittman a long time ago. Here's the problem I have with that. Do you know most fans? How many of the most fans do you know? I mean, how could you say that?
Yeah, most fans.
Now, if you said most fans on this message board, this on Facebook that I read, or on X or whatever you say, if you say that, then that's probably accurate. But when you say most fans, I don't think any of us have any idea what most fans think. I don't. And I'll tell you a little story on that. Years ago on Hogville, when they were all mad at Houston Nutt, Hogville did a poll, and Houston Nutt had 8% support, and all these people were saying, how can they keep this coach when he has 8% support? So I got on there and said, guys, 8% on Hogville is not 8% of the fan base, because the fan base is not all on Hogville.
Yeah.
So you can't do a Hogville poll and come up with accurate numbers. You'd have to have some kind of a scientific poll that gets into all segments of the fan base. So there was a guy that read Hogville, and he had money, and he contacted me, and he said, well, I was intrigued by what you said, and I really want to know. So he said, can you put me in touch with somebody that does a scientific poll? Well, my wife at the time was doing political campaigns for people running for office here in Arkansas, including statewide office, and she did. She knew, gave me the name of a company that did statewide polls for them. And when you're running political campaigns, you got to know where you stand.
Yeah.
You don't want somebody feeding you baloney. You want to know, where do we actually stand
Yeah, like
right
go
now?
through and poll households.
Yeah, so she gave me the number of this polling company, and I passed it on to him. Now, it cost him some bucks. I've long forgotten how much it was, but it wasn't cheap.
Yeah.
And he had this poll done. Well, 8% support turned into 58% support. Now, I was quick to point out, everybody went, whoa, what a big difference. Yes, but Frank Broyles once told me that a head coach at Arkansas in the various sports, really needs about 80% support. Yeah. If you drop below that, you got problems, okay? But I tell this story to once again point out that most of the time, we're not gonna do a scientific poll on anything.
There was somebody that got close to doing it. I believe it was Andrew Hutchinson. I brought him up on the show earlier, but I believe he did one with Best of Arkansas Sports at the end of football season, how everybody felt about Sam Pittman.
Okay, but I would like to know what poll he used.
He went through and he went on he said, here's the breakdown.
I'm just telling you, that's not a scientific poll.
Well,
he put energy and effort into it. But what I'm telling you is, you've got to reach the whole fan base.
No, I know. And he did say, well, these were some of our readers. These were Facebook. This was Twitter. This was this. And he broke down the numbers based off of where they came from as well, which I thought was quite interesting to see how people on Facebook differ from people on Twitter. I'm not saying it's the most scientific thing, but the results were quite interesting. Because I thought they were going to be a lot more people who were upset because that's the echo chamber we're in. And it turns out people were actually more mild than that.
Again, my point that I'm trying to make is, when you make a statement, most fans this, most fans that, you don't know, I don't know, nobody knows. You don't. You might have a general idea, but you don't know for sure. However, let me just, we did scan the internet for some reaction to Dave Van Horn after the series. And
oh, no.
here is some of them.
Okay.
Okay, where are we at here?
I think it's that first one. Statement here. I got you.
Have I already gone past
You
it?
went past it. Statement on Facebook right here. And we're not going to say any names, are we?
We're not going to say the names because these aren't people that ask us questions.
No.
I just got this off of Facebook where there was a lot of different back and forth on this. Okay, so the first statement, 4 series out of 5, we got our aces kicked. You're so full of excuses, DVH. We will never get that World Series win with your old BS. Okay, that's pretty negative. Here's another one. DVH, I've defended you for years, but it's time to show up with the coaching and stop making excuses like Friday night. You should be past all of this, but it's the same thing every year. Okay, that sounds bad.
All right.
But you also have this. All you haters, shut up. Dogs swept Texas last week. It's baseball. You don't win every game. Love you, DVH.
Oh, okay.
And then here's one. Sounds like we need some better fans. Woo pig suey.
For life?
For life, period. So, I mean, that's sort of what you
There you
get.
go. Yeah, that's 50-50.
It's not all negative, and I didn't do a survey to see if it was half and half. And truthfully, it's probably not. Because again, what I'm going to say to you is, when you're getting a reaction of fans who are mad at a coach, and you're getting it off social media tends to be negative.
Yeah.
They do. And this is why you see a lot of these companies a lot of these internet organizations, especially in sports, when they survive on number of hits they get. If they don't, they got to get hits to keep up their advertising. This is why you see them often side with the negative side.
Yeah.
Because they get these people on their side. I'm not saying it's bad, it's probably smart.
Well, that's what the headlines will be misleading.
The headlines are sometimes misleading. But if you want to be informed and you don't have an opinion one way or the other, I don't think this guy stinks, but I'm not sure, blah, blah, blah. What's the real story here? Does everybody want him fired? Do they want him to stay? What's the real answer here? You have to understand you're not going to get, in my opinion, an accurate balance.
Yeah.
What you would have to do, and I used to do this a long time ago, you just have to go around and talk to people in real life. Because that's what I found. When message boards first became popular, and there was overwhelming negativity with regard to Razorback athletics on Hogville when it first started, way more negative than it is today. And I would read all that stuff, and then I would take some of the same things they were discussing. I'd just be in Walmart, and so I'd see some guy, he'd come up to, hey, Mike, I don't know you, but blah, and I'd go, well, what do you think about this? Or you'd be at the post office. I never missed an opportunity when somebody came up and said, hey, nice to meet you, nice to see you in person. Never missed an opportunity to ask them what they thought. And you wouldn't believe the difference. They weren't as negative. They weren't as mad about things.
Right, but I go back to the point, it's the whole thing of Yelp, right? Have you ever heard the Yelp review, like, kind of theory? Is that there are more negative Yelp reviews than positive ones because you're more likely to get on the internet and say something when you feel like you've been slighted by a business, when you've been wronged. You're more likely to tell other people than you are if you had a really okay experience and it was overall positive and okay, sure, yeah, that was great.
I also think there can be different reasons for being negative.
Sure.
I think sometimes you're just mad and you want to blow off steam.
Vent.
People used to say, why is Nolan so angry in press conferences? Because I would talk to him right after a press conference was over, and he'd be laughing and telling funny stories. And Nolan asked me one time, he said, why do you interview me after a press conference? Why don't you just take the press conference stuff? And I said, because you're always mad, and people get the impression that you are always mad, and I want to show the other side to you. And I said, look, if you pay me to be your psychiatrist, then I will do that. But that's what you're doing. You're walking into these press conferences and you're using them like an analyst. You're going, you lay down on the couch and tell me your problems.
Yeah.
And then he would go off for about 30 minutes. And I am telling you, it was remarkable. He would come out of these press conferences, he'd walk out of there all mad, and you think, boy, this guy hates us. I had people come up to me all the time. You ever get tired of Nolan just being mad all the time? And I'm going, you ought to see him like 10 seconds after the press conference is over. He's out here telling funny stories and laughing and stuff. Well, I think that's part of what being negative on the internet is just, I'm mad, I'm going to blow off steam, and I'm going to feel better when it's over.
Absolutely. I 100% agree. So you're going to get a lopsided result if you look at the internet, for sure. Hogman80 says, we're going to get this question in before we have to take another break really quickly here, because I like this question a lot. 1 through 32 seeding is needed in baseball and softball. I'm tired of Arkansas getting screwed because of all the good programs that are within 500 miles of Fayetteville. Ridiculous how some lower seeds have easier regionals than a top 4 seed.
And he's mainly reacting to the softball regional
yeah.
that's already been announced, and the fact that Oklahoma State is in there, and some people believe, wait a minute, that shouldn't be. You shouldn't have a 4 national seed. You've got the 4 regional, and you've got a team that good as your number 2 seed. You shouldn't do that. Okay. I'm going to argue 2 different points. I'm going to try to explain why this happens.
Okay.
If you really believe in the seeding system, and what would seeding be? It would be a reward for what you've done.
Correct.
So you would, if you're the committee, then you would take all 64 teams that are in the field for the tournament, and you give a number to all of them, 1 through 64. And then what you would do is you would take the one regional, whoever the top seed in the entire tournament is, and the regional they host, you would take the worst 2 seed, the worst 3 seed, the worst 4th seed. And then you just work your way down. And then as you got toward the bottom, the 12 seed, the 13, the 14 in there, you'd have tougher teams as your 2 and 3 and 4 seeds.
Yeah.
If you did it that way, it would be fair. Okay? But they don't do it that way. Now, Jacob was talking to me earlier, and I think there's something to what he's saying is they like to take, it's called regionals anyway, and they like to take that into consideration.
Yeah.
You stay in your region, sort of.
Well, why? Because fans can travel, and
fans can travel.
At the end of the day, they do want you to also be rewarded for being able to play at your home stadium and make money off of a regional.
That's right. But let me tell you that there's another factor at place here that they don't want to talk about.
Oh, I know what you're going to say. I know what you're going to say.
And it's ESPN, because it's the TV people. If you took all of these, one national region, 2 regional, third region, and you did what I talked about, you'd mostly have blowouts, and it would be predictable. And the teams that went to the College World Series would be more predictable. There'd be fewer upsets, and ESPN would hate it, because viewers would be going, it's boring, I'm not watching that, I'll just wait till the College World Series.
Right, yeah, how you get
so
people to tune in.
And there's a point to that. But let's talk about the teams that get the shaft. I will look at Oklahoma State. Arkansas in 2022, I think it was, really tailed off at the end of the season. They had
You're talking about baseball. Baseball, yep.
They had a bad SEC tournament. They lost some of their last series. They've been strong early in the year, but man, they're on their way down. But they'd still been pretty good that year. They took Arkansas and they sent them to the Stillwater Regional. And Oklahoma State was good that year. They just handed it to
awesome.
Oklahoma State.
You were there.
I was there, and here's what happened. All these Razorback fans came over there and turned what would have been for Oklahoma State kind of a home type thing. We're all here.
Yeah.
They were selling standing room only tickets, and Arkansas fans were behind all these people in seats just going crazy. And Arkansas got inspired. They played. They had 2, I think they played each other twice. They may have played each other 3 times. Well, they did, I think.
Yeah.
But they beat them 2 out of 3 and advanced, and then went to the College World Series that year. So doing that little regional thing, ended up being the best thing that ever happened to Arkansas and the worst thing that ever happened to Oklahoma State. Then you can turn that around. TCU, a couple of years ago, same thing. TCU was, some people felt like when TCU came in here for that regional, they really deserved their own regional.
There was a lot of people that
So
felt
why
that,
are you taking them? And I can't remember where Arkansas was, or whether it was a 3 or a 4 region or whatever, but you take them and you stick them up there, and that's not fair. But they did it for whatever reason, and TCU won and went on to the College World Series. So it's just the way it works, and it's not going to change. And so you're going to get complaints. I really think softball, they've got a legitimate right to complain. First of all, they should have been.
It should have been a 3 seed.
We'll talk about that more in a minute. But this is the whole issue.
Yeah.
Yes, I understand why he's mad. Yes, I understand the logic between seeding people and then putting them into the brackets based on the seeding, but they're never going to do that.
Well, and I get that too, but you could even put the argument to basketball. I mean, basketball had a really tough. I mean, I thought the draw, I was going, oh my goodness, really? They put them with Kansas in the first round, and then St. John's. I'm going, ain't no way. But it ended up working out
So
for
the
them.
bottom line is you're just going to have to perform.
Yeah, I agree with you. Sometimes I think when you go, oh man, look at this, maybe it works out for you. I don't know. I mean, I still feel good about softball. We're going to get into that because I think that's our next question. But we do have to take a short break, and we will be back in just a few. Welcome back to this week's edition of Ask Mike. Courtney Mims alongside Mike Irwin here. Mike, we've just been talking about regionals, and we're going to talk about this softball regional because we have a question from Poppy Ramon who asked, I feel like we've seen in years past Courtney Deifel teams like this struggle in regionals and the supers. So I have to ask, will this be the year we finally get a team who goes to the Women's College World Series?
It's a better team than the ones in the past. I really do. I like their hitting, and their pitching is good enough. I think they could get into some problems in day 3, but you can't argue with the surge when they finished the season with 6 straight series wins, and then went to the SEC tournament and came really close to getting into the finals against maybe the best team there, Oklahoma. So I think they're better. But what people are now questioning is that Oklahoma State got put into this regional as a 2 seed, and again, they're close. So could this be what happened to our Oklahoma State baseball? Could this be in reverse now to Arkansas softball? Now, Oklahoma State was really good earlier in the season. They beat some SEC teams. They
Texas A&M.
beat Texas A&M.
The number 1 overall national seed. They beat Florida State, the number 5 national seed.
So they were hot.
Yeah.
They've cooled off a little bit. So we'll see if they're still cool. But you could look at that and say, wait a minute. And then I really think Arkansas deserved a 3 national seed instead of 4.
I do too.
Because why are you sticking Florida in there for? What's that all about? Did you just pull that out of your left ear?
I have no clue. I don't understand that. I saw Florida pop up and I went, well, I mean, I know they were talented this year, but Arkansas beat them.
Yeah.
I mean, I just.
And
I don't
Arkansas again came very close to making the finals. They were of the two games that decided who went to the finals. I mean, A&M just beat the drum off of them.
Handedly beat
And
Texas.
Arkansas had that game with Oklahoma, won until their pitching kind of ran down at the end.
And I'll say this too about, everyone going, oh, this is Arkansas. This is what happens if Arkansas teams. No, that's what, have you watched Oklahoma softball this year? How many times has Oklahoma softball come back in clutch situations like that? Oklahoma just Oklahomaed at the end of that game.
So
really.
Even though I think they kind of got the shaft a little bit, I'm going to say that I think they'll win their regional. I think that now the Super could be tough. Because again, Arizona State's one of the hottest teams. Arizona is one of the hottest teams out there.
Yeah.
And that's going to be tough if they come here. I still think that Arkansas will win. I just like their hitting. I like the way they do things. I think they're going to do it. I think they're going to make it to
OKC?
OKC.
Oh, I love that. And Mike, I'll say this, because I was talking to, I'm going to tease something real quickly here. I was talking to Bree Ellis's dad, Ron Ellis, this morning. And I said, Ron, you've watched a lot of these games. You've seen SEC softball for years now. What is different about this Arkansas team? And he said, Courtney, they can definitely make it to OKC. And I said, you feel really confident about that? He goes, I do. And I'm not just saying that because I'm Bree Ellis's dad. This team has shattered expectations. They just they see they've got number 2 Florida coming up. They've got number 2 Texas A&M coming up. They're not going to beat them. They've got a top 10 ranked Tennessee coming up. They're not going to beat them. And they just kept going, win the series, win the series, win the series. And so they just kept saying, your expectations, okay, think we aren't going to win, and we'll prove you wrong. So I think this is another situation where they're going, they got an Oklahoma State team coming up. They got a
The only thing you worry about is in breaking the momentum, in losing that game to Oklahoma, does that break their momentum? Do they kind of go back?
Was it like an Alabama situation
last
year?
I don't think so, but we'll see.
I hope not. I'm crossing my fingers because I really think Courtney Deifel, let's be honest, she deserves to go to the Women's College World Series, take a team to the Women's College World Series.
Absolutely.
So I 100% would like to see that for her to take an Arkansas team there. WV Hog fan asks, which team, softball or baseball, do you think will have the best success in the postseason? That's kind of hard to answer.
Well, it's hard to answer because we don't know the field for the Fayetteville Regional. We don't even know where they fit in.
We also, baseball regular season isn't over yet. So
we don't know where they're going to be. We don't know, who the super opponent would be, who that would likely be, and all of that. I will say that I'm going to go out on the limb a little bit here and say I think Arkansas baseball will be okay after the LSU thing. I think they'll play well here. And Tennessee is really struggling. So if they win that series and they're at home, this team plays better at home. There have been some Dave Van Horn teams that have got into postseason and didn't do well at home. I think this one will. They played well at home all year. I look at again against they do all three things well: hit, pitch, play defense. I think they will win their regional. I think they will win their super. That's sort of saying that without knowing who they're going to play. But I think they will do that, and then I think they'll get to Omaha. And then once they get to Omaha, do they have a better chance of winning it all, or the women? And I think they do because Van Horn's been there so many times.
Okay,
I think the first time you get to Oklahoma City, it could be a little overwhelming.
It could be, and I agree with you. We don't have anything to go off of with
Plus, Arkansas men are due, right?
They are. I think if the women can make it to OKC, I really just think that's awesome. I really, and correct me if I'm wrong, right? If the fans are out there, and correct me if I'm wrong, that would be awesome to see.
It'd be pretty good. It wouldn't be the same as if the men got there and then went 2 and out.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. I think just getting there, they want to tick that off.
When you haven't been there before, getting there the first time is a big deal.
That's what I'm saying. So that's what I'm trying to say there. And listen, you can correct me if I'm wrong on that. I would just like to see them getting to OKC. Woo Pig Mac says, I watched Courtney's interview with Kelsey Music. Thank you, Woo Pig Mac. It's still on our YouTube if you'd like to watch it. I really enjoyed it. However, it's not going to be easy competing in the SEC. Will they be able to win some conference games with this roster?
I'll let you answer this after I make a few comments here because you're the one that did the interview with her. I think I've already seen enough to know I think this team's going to be better than it was a year ago.
I think so too.
I don't know how many conference games they'll win. I don't know whether they could somehow get into the NCAA tournament. But I do think they're going to be improved because I think what she's going to do is emphasize toughness.
Yes.
Tough defense, tough inside scoring. And with Mike Neighbors, it was always about outside shooting. It was always the defense. He just didn't emphasize it enough. And when you're trying to turn things around, that's where you start. It has to be with toughness. So that's what I'm going to be looking for when they start playing next season. I want to see some evidence that this team has more fight in it. Physical, we're going to get in there and we're going to compete.
So I'll tell you this. I agree with you 100%. There were some, I was told this from people who watch practice, that there were some girls at practice that went, oh my gosh, she is tough. And girls who were on last year's team. So she's already instilling that toughness early on, right? And instilling that toughness in practices early on. I enjoyed watching the practice videos of her where she was coaching the team. I enjoyed watching that. And there's just this kind of sense, and this is my opinion, Mike. This is my opinion, so this is not anybody else's, but there's just a different vibe around that facility and with her at the helm, where I felt like at the end with Neighbors, it was just kind of like, okay, it's another season. I don't really say like lack of enthusiasm, but that's kind of what it felt like a little bit, and maybe just a little bit of laziness. But with her, it's this energy, it's this great vibe. So I even think, because I know some people said, well, she brought some of the girls back from last year. Well, I think she's going to kick them into high gear and say, look, if you want a spot on this team and if you want to play for me, I'm going to demand a lot.
The X factor is all these foreign students that she's brought in.
Well, and especially, I mean, you talk about the 2 girls from Oral Roberts that came with her, really talented players. So I like those two. I like the addition of Yvette Mayberry. If you haven't watched her highlights, she's fun to watch. So go and watch Yvette Mayberry. She got some of those basketball genes from her dad, okay?
Right.
So I like what they're doing. It's really early on to tell, and I know her roster's not 100% complete yet, so we'll see what happens, but I think they'll win more SEC games than they did last year. That isn't really that hard to do. They didn't win that many.
That's right.
Sorry. The bar's really low. Apologize for that. KY Hogg wants to know, anything new on Cal's recruiting? I will keep bugging you guys until you give me an answer.
And she is officially bugged. She even told me, don't put that on there this week because you'll just encourage him to do it next week.
He asked the same question
Well,
every
and
week.
he's been very honest to say he's going to keep asking until we give him something different. And what have we been saying for 3 weeks? Basically you, because you follow that more than I do. But basically you've been saying, yeah, you think Carter Knox will come back. It's not 100% guaranteed. But
no, it's not.
supposedly if he goes through the combine and then he will come back. And then supposedly there's one other person out there that nobody knows anything about. It's not.
It
not.
just depends on some things, yeah.
Yeah, and it could be a scoring guard, could be a power forward, could be another big.
Yeah.
So I think we said that last week.
Mike, I'm going insane. I said that last week on the show. When you asked for an update, I gave you the update. I have not heard anything the past week, KY Hogg.
We're talking about Cal on the radio today, and the fact that he just gets Arkansas. That's the thing that has surprised me. Look how he went over to Oklahoma City and was watching an NBA game. He knows Razorback fans like it, that he's over there.
I will say this. We have something new on Cal. We do have something new on Cal. Have you seen the beard he's
the beard.
rocking?
He's got the
Cal's
beard. I don't know what that means.
Well, apparently Kentucky people told me, and I wasn't paying attention enough during the off season. I only paid attention during the season. But during the off season, he would typically grow that beard. But his son was even shocked. He was like, what is going on with that beard, Dad?
Yeah, well, anyway, I have a feeling that he's sitting there kind of laughing at all this stuff about what's he going to do? Is there going to be another guy? Is recruiting done? He's just kind of going, yeah, I'll keep you in mystery for a month, a full month.
He moves in the shadows. What did I tell you, Mike?
Yeah,
he is not like Eric Musselman, and we're so used to that. Everybody's so used to an Eric Musselman offseason where you were just hearing things every week, right? You're just
Kevin McPherson always knew what was going on. Now he's like,
I don't know. I mean, there's something going on, that's for sure. But yeah, that is the news we have. And then J.J. Andrews, I think, is announcing Thursday.
Right. That's big. But that's big for 26.
That's big for. Well, I'm just saying that KY Hogg. Is it news in general, or is it news on next year's roster? I think he just said anything new on Cal's recruiting. So I'm going to put in there J.J. Andrews and keep an eye on him on Thursday, if that gives you a little teaser there. Cajun Hogg wants to know, is this the season when Yurachek finally fires Pittman? There's a part of the fan base that is never going to accept him. Seems like it's going to happen eventually.
I don't know that it's eventually going to happen because I think what I've heard is that he wants to coach 2 more years.
Okay.
And that his goal is to leave this program in better shape than when he took it. And when you start talking about Hunter Yurachek tolerating this mediocrity or whatever people are trying to say, I think and I've explained this before, I think his attitude a couple of years ago was, especially when they found out that Petrino was coming in here, and you think that Yurachek had something to do with him coming here. Mm-hmm. But he felt like, okay, that's going to make a big difference. Rather than spend all this money buying something out, and then here's the thing that these people that want to get rid of Pittman never take into consideration. They keep saying, yeah, and get the money to hire somebody big. Well, where's that money coming from? Is it coming from you? Because it's not. And you talk to the boosters, and I don't hear anybody out there going, it's not the same thing as it was with Cal, where you had one big booster that was willing to put up huge. Nobody's out there talking about that with football right now. So the plan is, okay, Petrino comes in, you got this new quarterback, you went from 4 wins to 7, and you won a bowl game. And you won a bowl game against a good team. Okay, now it's year 2. I don't think there's any question this team is better than it was a year ago. Your quarterback is going to be better because he's in his 2nd year under Petrino. They've really done a good job of bringing in some wide receivers, and there's a lot of talk about those wide receivers. They think they've got so many, I think they feel like they're going to come up with some big guys. Tight end situation, I think they feel good about that. The big difference is the O-line. They feel like they finally got a left tackle that can block, and that's going to make a big difference. Then you got a left guard that can block, then you got a center that can block, and there's maybe a little bit of a question mark over on that right side. But Taylon Green is going to be protected a lot better. Okay, now the secondary. Well, they're going to be solid at linebacker, which means the pass rush will probably be pretty good. Don't know about the secondary.
Yeah.
So there are questions there. Here's the problem. I think they're going to be better. The schedule is a whole lot tougher.
Tough.
Okay, let's start with non-conference. You got to play Notre Dame at home. Okay, that was a dumb idea, but you're going to.
That was 10 years ago.
I know, but
I mean,
this is a bad time to make this happen. So you got Notre Dame coming in here. Then you have to go to Memphis. Are you serious? How did that pop up on this? Going to Memphis? That's a road game, and it could be very tough. And then you're going to play Arkansas State. I don't know how they've never played them before. They're going to play them in Little Rock. I guarantee you there's going to be a lot of Arkansas State fans in that facility. So you don't know how motivated are they, how much do Razorback players kind of go, what are we playing these guys for, and they overlook them. You just don't know how that game's going to come out.
So you hope not.
So that's 3 of your 4 non-conference games that really look tough. And then guess what? You go on the road to Tennessee. You had them here last year. You're going on the road now. You're going on the road to Ole Miss. You're going on the road to LSU. You're going on the road to Texas. That's half your SEC games. And then you got A&M coming in here. Yeah. So if you go 4-4 in the SEC, that's pretty good. But how do you go 4-4? That means you're going to beat A&M here, and I don't know that happens.
The funny thing is, like, you're looking and you're going, where are 6 wins?
I know.
That makes you nervous.
So they could be a better team and not win as many games. So is he fired then? Maybe. I think likely. Okay, but now what happens? This is just my opinion.
Oh, okay. All right. I'm going to hear it.
I think you said that you thought Hunter Yurachek had a lot to do with Bobby Petrino.
I did.
They had to really push to get him hired because of his previous situation.
Yeah.
I think there's a chance if Pittman somehow steps down after this year that Hunter Yurachek could go back to the board and said, Petrino's been on campus for 3 years. Hadn't done anything weird. Nothing bad's happened. He's served his time. Make him the coach. And maybe they can make that happen. I don't know. I'm not saying.
I don't know.
I'm not sure.
I see the Rhett Lashley thing happening.
The Rhett Lashley thing may be, if that happens, it may be more a year or 2 away.
Right.
Here's the problem with Lashley. He's got a good situation where he is right now because he's got all kinds of NIL money, and he's at a school where you can win. It's not the SEC. Yeah. Okay, but if that NIL money gets thrown into a pot and there's a cap on it, and he suddenly doesn't have that advantage, that job doesn't look like it looks right now. And plus, he's back playing in a 30,000-seat stadium in a town where nobody cares about college sports. What would be the attraction of coming back here where it's the whole state behind you and he's from this state? And if the NIL pot thing is all in one cap, then he's not at a disadvantage anymore. Under those circumstances, I could see him being willing to come back here.
Me too. I could see that more than the situation with Bobby Petrino, only because, and this is just how the situation was told to me. I'm not saying it's the correct way because you hear things through multiple sources, but that they had to fight for Bobby. And one of the things was the way they got him on campus was that he's not the head coach.
I know.
He's not making decisions like the head coach.
I know all that.
I don't know why suddenly they would have
because you would have 3 years of he kept his nose clean, he didn't do anything.
Yeah, but he kept his nose clean as the OC, not the head coach.
Well, he's
not making the decisions.
Yeah, he sort of is.
Almost every
one of those offensive coaches were hired because he wanted them hired.
I know. But Mike, you and I know
they
that.
work for him.
They
work for him.
He's still not the head coach. He's still not the person. So I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what happens. Our final question of the show is Arnold Ziffel.
Green Acres. Ziffel.
Green Acres.
He's a pig.
I didn't know that. Arnold Ziffel's a pig?
I think so.
Oh, well, that makes sense. Okay, Arnold Ziffel says, we lost a great one in Harold Horton last week. He exemplified Arkansas football in so many levels. Any good stories about Coach Horton you care to share?
Well, first of all, he was a real good source for me because he knew everything going on inside that. He was the head of the Razorback Foundation, but he knew everything over there. He knew all the people. He'd played here. He'd coached here as an assistant coach. He was a head coach at UCA. He just knew things all over the state. And so I used him as a source. It was interesting the way he treated that. If there was something particularly sensitive that he was willing to tell me, he would say, all right, I'm going to tell you this, but you can only use it if you get somebody else to confirm it. Don't use it if it's just me telling you this. And he trusted me that I wouldn't just make it up, say, yeah, I found a guy, and then use it anyway. I would. If I found somebody else that said it, then I would use it. If not, then I wouldn't. And so we developed a pretty good relationship like that. He trusted me. Interesting story. Okay. This was a few years before Frank Broyles was actually forced out, but he was getting up into his approaching 80, into maybe 80 years old, somewhere in there, and John White really wanted him out. He just felt like he was too old to be the AD. John White wanted him out the day that John White got hired. So we fast forward a few years, and White was always picking at Frank, always trying to figure out ways to get rid of him. Now, I'm in Frank's office one day, and I'm doing an interview, and Frank's agitated. And when it's over, I said, what's wrong with you? You seem agitated. He goes, oh. He said, John White's bugging me again. He said he's going off to Hilton Head for a while. He's had some minor surgery on his face, and it's going to cause some scabs, and so he didn't want to be seen in public, but he's going to go off for a couple of months. And he said, when I come back, I want to sit down with you and talk to you about a contract. Frank knows what that means. Frank's never had a contract. If you sign a contract, your boss doesn't have to fire you. All he has to do is let that contract run out, and you're not employed anymore. And so Frank knew what was up. So I was like, okay, Frank may be on the way out. I don't know. Well, months went by because this was in the spring. And so now we get into the fall. Football season's about to start, 2-a-days. And they have one of these coaches' golf tournaments where the media's out there, and Coach, I think Bielema was the coach at that point, and he has a press conference, and they have a big tent, and everybody eats under it out at Bella Vista somewhere on some of those golf courses. And I couldn't play that day, so I was on my way out after the press conference with my camera and everything. Harold's sitting there by himself under the tent. He said, come over here. And so I went over and sat down. We started talking like we have. And at some point I said, hey, I told him about the conversation. I said, I haven't heard that Frank signed any contract. Whatever happened on that deal? He said, oh, here's what happened. He said Frank went to Jim Lindsay. Now, Jim Lindsay played under Frank, considered him like a second father. And Jim was the chairman of the board of the trustees, and he controlled supposedly 6 votes out of the 10. So anything Jim Lindsay wanted, if he really wanted it, he could make it happen. Now, I was told he rarely threw his weight around. He played it straight up. But if push came to shove, you didn't want to mess with Jim Lindsay. So he said Frank called and complained. So Jim called up John White, and he got B. Allen Sugg, who's the university system president. He got him on a conference call. And he said, President Sugg, I just want you to listen because I don't want you to think I'm trying to pull anything under the table that you don't know about. I want you to listen to this conversation. And then he said to John White, Frank Broyles is like a dad to me. I will not let him be treated this way. This is not the way he's going to go out. He deserves the right to retire on his own, blah, blah, blah. And he said, so if you don't stop doing what you're doing, if you don't stop trying to get rid of him, I'm going to get rid of you.
Oh, my goodness.
And he said, you know as well as I do that I control 6 of the 10 votes. I could have your job right now if I wanted to. And so that was the end of it. So Harold tells me this story. So then I see Jim Lindsay a few weeks after that. And I mentioned it to him. I said, Harold told me this story, blah, blah, blah. And Jim goes, well, that story's true. And I said, well, wow. And he said, well, you got to understand, I didn't want to do that. I felt really bad about doing that. He said, in fact, I felt so bad that he said, I got sick. I ended up going to the hospital. I just felt terrible about having to throw my weight around like that. But he said, that's how much Frank meant to me. Now, here's the interesting part, and I've thought about this a lot. Let's say that John White had gotten Frank to sign that contract, and let's say it was for 3 years. That's about the time that John White actually got Frank, because he went down those last 3 or 4 years. He made some mistakes. He said some things, and in public that were kind of weird, and so they all got together at some point, and Jim realized he no longer had the votes. I don't even think he was chairman anymore. I think he was just on the board, and he couldn't save Frank's job, and so Frank was indeed fired. Would it have been better for him to sign that contract, and then the way he leaves is you just don't renew his contract rather than being fired? I don't know, but here's what I told people over the years as Frank got older. I said, look, there's only two ways he's not going to be the AD at Arkansas, because I know him. He's either going to have to pass away or he's going to have to be fired. He will not willingly give that job up because it means too much to him, and it did. It was everything to him. So he ended up getting fired. And I saw him several times after that. He was okay. He began to deal with it all right. He was like, okay, I knew they were eventually going to do this, but he said, I was going to fight for that job as long as I had it. So all of that is a result of Harold Horton giving me this little story that then I could go back and make sure that it was true and get this stuff from. And my job has largely been fun because of stuff like that, because people tell you things that really happened and you know they really happened.
Yeah.
And now I don't have any problem revealing that to the public now because Frank's gone. We all know what happened, but it was really an interesting period in the history of that whole thing about John White trying to get rid of Frank. And he eventually hired, the guy that he wanted, which was Jeff Long.
And it all started from a little story that you heard from Harold Horton.
Harold Horton.
There you go. Well, that was a great story, Mike. You've never told me that. Hopefully we'll have some more good stories to share on next week's Ask Mike. We'll see you next Monday to answer more of your questions.